Welcome to Slash Forward. This may be a personal question, but have you ever been probed? Not many have. At least not in the traditional sense of being scooped up by unknown extraterrestrial beings to be explored for fun and profit. But if it were to happen, we want to be ready, and it's important to set expectations. We're going to do that with a brief recap of the 1993 film Fire in the Sky. A gang of small-town loggers goes out to put in an honest day's work of manual labor, toiling from dawn to dusk, cutting down trees, clearing brush, and playing grab-ass with some chainsaws. But when the group comes back into town completely rattled and missing one close friend, a dark and intense mystery begins to unfold that, if we're to take at face value, involves the men coming in close contact with a third kind of something that made off with their chum Travis Walton. The boys are holding back something, but whatever it is, are they willing to go to jail for murder to keep the secret? Can they be convicted without a body? And what if Travis showed back up 5 days later 2 towns over? We'll deal with all that while trying to clarify the intended audience for this film. As always, let me know what alien encounter-based movies keep you up at night. I'm not sure anything beats miscellaneous episodes of Unsolved Mysteries or A Current Affair, and check out some of the other alien fare on offer on this very channel. Let's get to it. We open on a misty night, perfect for some bovine mutilation or anal exploration, it would seem, and we observe a light swelling up from a distant source. In this case, an old truck doing some overland racing with complete disregard for its accessories. As a couple of salty old chaps stare in wonder at the condition of the truck, the occupants casually exit and sullenly walk into the pub. Their demeanor screams that something ain't right, as they verbally commit to sticking with the story they've concocted. No matter what, Greg, you soft boy. Since Mike's in charge, they elect him to make the fated call. Communication goes out to Lieutenant Waters, state investigator extraordinaire, letting him know a local sheriff is in over his simple head. He arrives right as the looky-loos are being turned away, so they have some privacy. Sheriff Davis greets him and explains they have a missing local, Travis Walton. Then Deputy Clay debriefs him on all the main players in this mysterious whatever, but it's always best to get first-hand accounts, so they head in for the full story. After setting up his portable recording device, he starts by seeking some simple background information on old Travis, Mike's BFF. He was what we would commonly refer to as an absolute stud, ripping through town with reckless abandon, hair whipping through the wind, and leaving the ladies wanting. This is in drastic contrast to Mike's simple but contented home life. Contented other than the near-constant nagging about the precarious status of their mortgage. Travis rolls up to find Mike tuning up the beast and utterly ignoring his entire existence. Desperate for attention, he shares a little drawing he made of their future motorcycle dealership, but with Mike's house put up as collateral to fund the equipment for their logging contract, he has little chill nor time for dreaming. Travis then says what up to the family and creeps in on Dana. Oh man, are you doing your buddy's daughter? Once the boys are all rounded up, they head out to the site with Travis and Dallas sniping at each other the whole way. They reach the trail, gear up, and get to work doing what they do best. Cutting logs. They spend the day logging out of their minds whilst threatening each other and so forth. You know, guy stuff. They break for lunch and bask in the sunlight as it tints their chests a beautiful nut brown. Travis checks in with Mike as he tends to his investment. Here we are relieved to learn that Dana is Mike's sister, but feel tense when we find out he's not thrilled about their relationship because he views Travis as a head-in-the-clouds dreamer, the worst kind of person. Circling back around, it's revealed that they wrapped up their day around dusk and left the site with Travis in their company. Waters seems suspicious about this, so he checks in with Dallas, the group's contrarian, but he holds the line, even giving an excuse for the odd injury on his hand.
I did it to myself earlier today.
You ought to be more careful, son.
I'll do my best, Daddy.
Ooh, it's getting spicy. The sheriff brings them back around to talking specifically about what they claim to have seen. It was a light, an eerie light, situated somewhere beyond the horizon. They presumed it to be a fire or a plane crash, and as they drove, it seemed to move with them. They continue because this is the one road out, so if the fire's blocking it, they're spending the night in the woods. No sooner do they round a corner and stop than does Travis hop out and wander into a field toward a pulsing something that seems to acknowledge his presence and welcome him into its warm bosom. It's so enchanting he can barely make for the truck before it strikes him down, leaving him smoking in the grass. As do they all. We then learn that at some point during the opening sequence, they stopped in a field to dispute whether they should continue on or leave him for good. Mike feels honor-bound to at least make an attempt to recover his best friend's corpse, so he kicks him out and goes back alone so as not to risk any additional blood on his hands. Mike claims 'twas nary a sign of his old pal anywhere. Lieutenant Waters is hesitant to believe the events transpired as described, so Bobby finally pipes up. And good for him. But Waters is a seasoned pro and he tap dances around their smooth brains and weak wills. Because their story claims Travis to be gone, they're in no real rush to head out in the dark and search for him. The authorities reconvene in the parking lot and make plans to put on a search in the morning, presuming this to be a case of murder. When Mike gets home, word is already spread around town and he's confronted about his willingness to leave his pal behind. Kate's also confused about whether Travis is supposedly gone or dead or what. Meanwhile, David puts in for a little extra help from JC and seeks absolution for his actions. The choppers arrive the next morning and the party gets underway.
If that boy's out here, I want to find him.
Yeah, isn't that what you're all doing here? They have some trouble locating the exact spot due to it being nighttime and confusing when they were last here. While they ponder, Travis's big brother Dan shows up to threaten them a little bit. Everyone's out searching for a good while when the first signal goes up of a possible development. The digging crew starts in on the spot identified by the dogs, but it's just some old dusty bones from another murder a while back. That night, Mike learns he's been taken off the logging contract and replaced with an entirely new crew. He then gets the business from Kate, who is concerned about their reputation in town and just wants to know what up, but he can't bring himself to tell her the whole truth. To spare his family, he goes to stay at the local motel, and proprietor Tom lets him know the reporters and UFO buffs are on their way into town. And the next morning, he is immediately confronted with questions as he attempts to go run his errands. He's also accosted on the sidewalk by a representative of a group who claims to know the truth of what he experienced. Then, at the diner, even grimy Buck Norton has the audacity to stare at them with hell in his eyes. George reveals that Waters has been on him, looking to squeeze out a confession. It turns out they spoke the devil into existence, as the law walks in and offers them a chance to take a lie detector test. This gets Mike all wound up, so Waters walks him out and reveals that young George spilled the beans on Dallas's hand wound, which was pursuant to an altercation with Travis. But why would he cover for a scumbag to the detriment of his best friend? Waters isn't sure, but he lets him stew on that a bit. When Mike and David head out to find Dallas for a pleasant chit-chat, Dallas gives his boys a little parting gift before leaving his card game, and they let him know what's been going down and the importance of cooperating. But due to his prior run-ins with the law, he warns them of the danger of lie detector testing. However, Mike insists via scuffle that they all stand together in this.
All right, Dallas, you just be there.
You didn't say a time. Back in town, they've called a meeting of the elders to discuss the public concern. No one feels safe to walk about and wonder why no arrests have been made if they all know via conjecture that they done murdered the young lad. With their names excessively besmirched, Mike can no longer hold his tongue. He shames them all for their naughty presumptions and throws the gauntlet down on that lie detector test, daring any of them to talk some shit to him while he's there, demonstrating your boy's got a real pair of balls on him. When they arrive the next morning, old Cy Gilson's driven in clear from Phoenix to promise them a clean test. When Davis signs off on it, they proceed. We're then treated to your classic interview montage as they're put to the test, sometimes assured, sometimes wavering. Gilson works his magic, and damn it if they don't prove to be some tough nuts to crack. One test comes back inconclusive, so they try to get them back in for round 2, but Mike loses his mind and refuses to be put through more trials. After they leave, Cy reveals that with what they have currently, the lot of them appear to be what is referred to in the business as truthful daddies. In a shocking twist, at the end of day 5 of this whole ordeal, Mike receives a collect call from Travis. He scoops up some sympathetic parties and they rush to the identified service station 2 towns over. In the shadows, they find their boy naked and afraid, withdrawing from human touch and screaming, so not 100%. Their first instinct is to call those alien freaks to come lend a hand, but Jarvis proves to be a thirsty bitch, more interested in knowledge acquisition than helping. They drag his ass out of there as Travis has some sort of vision. The subsequent gurney ride is reminiscent of some of his recent experiences, so he gets to relive the creeping dread. He ends up bunking by himself so he can be alone with his thoughts, but Mike sneaks in to reassure him that everyone was super sad that he was gone, and that he really did them a solid by showing back up, since they were being investigated for murder and all. He mentions offhand how he came back, only to learn that Travis had not even realized he had left. Mike doesn't appreciate the way that he seems to be processing this, and rightly points out that Travis kinda started the whole thing by trying to be a free spirit. Travis is discharged later and emerges into a confusing world of flashing lights and pushy reporters. In town, he's stared at by the adults, but adored by the children for having gone to space. Waters catches up with him here to start a casual conversation and see if he can suss out some intel. But he's not much of a talker no more, and really doesn't appreciate the stranger's vague insinuations. When he arrives home, they try to provide as much environmental stimulation as possible, leaving them all a little disappointed that he's not as excited as they. But they don't know that he has unsettling images stuck in his brain now. When he doesn't show up for chow time, Dana finds him hiding out below the kitchen table, where some spilled syrup induces a flashback to a less happy time, when he woke up in a sweet sticky cocoon. He carefully punches his way out, but the exterior is much less warm and inviting. He rolls over the edge, but is able to float and has hold of some type of umbilical cord. This eventually snaps him back into a separate, mucousy cocoon, with a moist but rotten potential new friend. He begins to slowly make his way toward what he perceives to be the top. What he finds there is not promising, but his desire for the comforts of home forces him into strange company. It turns out these are just spacesuits. They're not occupied. Well, most of them are not occupied. A firm kick in the face earns him a long trip down a dusty hallway for some table time. We can tell from the various items in the tunnel that they are Earth hobbyists of some type, although they don't seem to have much respect for their craft. After a brief consultation, they seal him down with a durable membrane that becomes form-fitting upon moisturization. They do open some courtesy holes for him, but only so they can roughly lube him up before cramming some crude mechanisms into his mouth and eye. Then, he has the long, slow pleasure of bearing witness as they unveil their intent to utilize their most intricate and precise probing device. To what end? We don't know. When he comes to, he's at the doctor's office, surrounded by people who want to provide their support and assistance. Before Lieutenant Waters leaves, he suggests that one day at some point in the future, the truth will come out, and their little attention-seeking ruse will crumble all around them. No matter how long it takes, on that day, he will then arrest them for hard fibbing, a Class C misdemeanor. Many years later, we drop in on Dana and Travis in happier times after he's put his trauma behind him. He revs up the family wagon to head into work, but turns back upon the remembrance of a thing. He goes to see his old friend Mike, who, in the intervening years, has grown wild and distrustful of the folks he sees. Travis convinces him to go for a ride to talk through some old hurt, and he takes him back to the fateful spot. They're both haunted by the events that transpired that evening, even now. Travis has brought him here to offer forgiveness to Mike and accept responsibility for his part, and it all worked out in the end, as Travis never again in his life pursued a novel experience. Maybe I've been watching some straightforward movies, but I feel like I keep saying there isn't a whole lot to elaborate on in this section. That feels like the case here as well, and is likely due to the time period in which the movie was produced. Coming out in '93, this film is just your basic straight-through story based on true events. The biggest flourish included a brief, nested flashback sequence in the beginning that sprinkled in a little unreliable narration. After that, it just sort of took you through. I feel like that was more typical back then because there wasn't so much emphasis on remakes and retellings, and trying to make all the standard tropes seem like something new and exciting. One of the two things that spring to mind just from this recap involves the shallow grave they found in the woods. I joked about an old murder, but they actually identified the bones to be canine, and the sheriff declared that some hunter likely buried his dog out there. The other thing was the drastic turn Mike had taken in his general attitude. This was more hinted at throughout the film, so it didn't necessarily fit in with a quick summary. He and Kate were having trouble beforehand, so he didn't expect them to last long. In addition, his personal struggle throughout revolved around the idea that the town he grew up in, where everyone knew him intimately, would so easily turn on them and presume that he had murdered his best friend. They made a big point of accentuating that the gang left Travis because they were convinced he was already dead. He seemed to be haunted by the possibility that he would forever be viewed as a liar about the UFO incident and mistrusted about whether the whole truth of the episode was ever shared. It ended up not being murder, but clearly something severe had happened. What it was, however, was inexplicable. This was apparently bad enough to prompt him to move out into the woods to be alone for an extended period of time. When Travis notified him that he and Dana were having a second child, Mike actually had not even heard or realized they had a first. That's how far gone he was. And despite the straightforward nature of the narrative, there were several things that were left outstanding, even if they didn't impact the outcome of the story. Mainly, the whole group talked about getting their story straight and hinted at a bigger truth that was underlying the narrative they presented. Kate urgently wanted to know what really happened. Mike declined to say more, but seemed hesitant about it, as though there was something there that he wasn't telling her. The implication was that this was to protect them all from misunderstandings about what really happened that night. However, the story they provided was about alien abduction. The unbelievable part is the part they came out with right from the start. Since the flashback of the story was being told by Mike based on the outline they agreed to, we could view it as unreliable. We were just seeing what he wanted the investigators to see. But then there was no deeper truth that was ever shared. The group didn't actually know what happened to Travis, and no bombshells were revealed later. So what was the deal with that attitude? They admitted to leaving him in the field, making them cowards and potentially responsible for his death or disappearance, and they freely blamed his disappearance on aliens, which makes them look like wackadoos. I'm not sure what was gained from whatever they were withholding, or if they even were. It's important because it is the central dramatic theme of the movie that provides basically all of the tension between the boys with each other and against the authorities. The only other concern I had was that I would like to have seen more of the abduction stuff, and for it to have come earlier. I think the central point of tension should have come from the implications of Travis's return and how he and they dealt with that. This would have put some of those gnarlier elements earlier in the film and provided more opportunities to sprinkle in some more throughout. Also, they all passed the lie detector test other than one inconclusive result, but they also rightly pointed out the unreliability of these types of tests, which can be manipulated or provide inconsistent results based on subjective measures like how worked up the person being tested may be or the interpretation of the tester. Despite establishing that, they came back with an info card to let us know the boys all returned in the 90s to take another test and they all passed this time. Who gives a shit? If they're unreliable in general, they're certainly not going to do much for you 15 years later, after everyone's had time to convince themselves of the truth of their story or gotten themselves so familiar with talking about it that questions don't invoke a negative, involuntary response from their bodies. Despite that, this was a pretty entertaining movie. It has sort of a creepy slumber party vibe with how they led up to the abduction story and the environment in which it was told. I also realized that over a handful of alien-based movies we've covered, a lot of them revolve around the concept of an abduction, but not around an actual abduction. This is the only one I can think of that actually shows what's going down on the ship once they get their hands on you. And they did a really good job of representing that in an interesting and unique fashion. The way everything was so industrial and rough, no consideration for human bodies, which they likely consider fodder for whatever their pursuits happen to be, it really lent an air of authenticity. It was also a nice touch to have various fluids associated with the different tests they were running and how they wanted to prep parts of his body. Who should watch is a pretty good question and may be hard to answer. If you're a fan of alien movies and true story stuff, this one should be fairly high on your list. It will likely also appeal to people who have nostalgia for this time period or who enjoyed getting spooked out by these types of movies as a kid. It seems to exude the quality of being the type of movie that messed some people up when they were younger. As a general warning, this is more of a mystery movie than anything else. It's well known for the abduction sequence specifically, but that comes hard and fast, basically right at the end. I think it's a good payoff and the movie is worth it, but if you're expecting something gnarly and brutal based on the reputation and visuals you've seen, it really isn't that for 95% of its runtime. And before we go, I'd like to give a huge thanks to my donors memorialized in the Hall of Headshots. I have a website set up where you can support the channel through donations or merch. Any donation unlocks a growing collection of uncensored movie recaps. And if you enjoyed the video, I would love for you to become a part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.